Hello again, my dear language learning master. Well, hope you're doing great today, and I'm happy to welcome you to episode number 6 of the Language Input Podcast, in which you know that I'm going to address the most common questions and misconceptions when it comes to the language learning process. All right, and yeah, as usual, before getting started, I highly encourage you to leave your comments down below if you're listening to it on YouTube. I think on the podcast platforms, you can also comment down below. I'm not sure, but anyway, you get the point. Yes, let me know what you think on this topic, and whether you have any other question around the language learning process, because that's going to help me a lot. You're going to give me ideas for future episodes, and I'll be more than happy to talk about it and to help you with your particular question as well. All right. Yeah, so don't be shy, don't be afraid, and let me know. Perfect. So yeah, let's get started with today's topic. And today I want to talk about immersion, or is it the best strategy to immerse yourself in a foreign country in which your target language is spoken? Okay, because I'm sure you've heard that many times, that people saying that the best way in order to learn a language is to live in a country where your target language is spoken, right? If you want to learn Spanish, go to Spain or Colombia or Mexico. Or if you want to learn English, go to the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, etc. Right? And well, it can certainly be a great strategy, but not so fast. All right, because as I talked about before in a previous episode, comprehensible input is the key to the entire process. All right, so we learn a language when we understand what we're listening to and what we're reading. So with that in mind, especially for people who are beginners, I mean even more so starting from scratch, when you go to a foreign country and you know nothing about the language, I mean, you might be exposed to the language for a few hours a day, but it's nothing but noise to you. So it's not really helping you, right? And I think many times that's the case. And it can actually be a shocking experience, because, if you have an intermediate level in the language, and you can, even if you cannot communicate the way you'd like to yet, but if you can understand what's going on, if you can understand what people tell you when you're hanging out with friends or anyone in the street or whatever, of course, it's probably one of the best ways in order to keep improving, because you're gonna have access to input in the target language for several hours every day, right? In real life situations, like I said, hanging out with friends, or going to the supermarket, to the local store, or to any place in the city or in the country, right? But I mean, especially in Spain, I'm gonna talk about this case because I'm from Spain, and it used to be. Maybe not so much right now, but there are a lot of, courses or trips, in which, adults or even kids, they travel to England or Ireland or even the United States in order to learn English, right? And well, I'm not going to talk about the courses themselves, the type of courses they are, but. And yeah, this also works for adults who go to a different country in order to work there, right? When they're complete beginners, especially, and even beginners, it might be a shocking experience, because, people always say when you need to use the language, when your life is on the line, you're going to learn the language. Well, it's not that easy. And... I'm trying to think of anyone now, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who tried that approach, and eventually decided to come back to their country or to move to a different country because they just couldn't speak the language. And even in that pressure situation in which you need the language, I mean, you need to understand, you need to communicate in the language. When you're a complete beginner, it can actually be pretty tough, because all you're listening to, all you're hearing is just noise. It's not comprehensible, so you're not really learning the language, and it is frustrating, right? And actually, my own personal case, my first year here in Poland, that was when I studied here, right? And our classes at the university were in English, because we were students from pretty much all over the world, but especially European countries. From France, Portugal, Italy, Hungary, Greece, Poland, of course, and many other countries. So the classes were in English. And we were hanging out with, people from different European countries and even other non-European countries. So English was sort of the language that we used to communicate, right? So we actually didn't need to learn Polish. And throughout the entire year, I probably got exposed to Polish for quite a while, a lot of time. But most of the time, it wasn't comprehensible. So even though I was listening to Polish, to my brain, it was just nice, because I wasn't really connecting or linking or making the connection between a certain sound and its meaning in my head. All right, because I always talk about the same example to put the language learning process in a simple way. The idea is not to learn that the sound manzana is the Spanish equivalent of the word apple, but to link or to make the connection between the sound manzana and the mental representation of an apple in your head. I hope it makes sense, all right? And that works for, isolated words and phrases, structures, and the language as a whole, right? So when you're, I was listening to Polish sounds, but I didn't know what they meant. So, it was useless for me, because I wasn't learning the language. And actually now, after a few years, I actually have some friends who still don't speak Polish, like international friends from other countries who still don't speak Polish, because they don't really need to, because especially with young people, you can pretty much communicate in English. I was gonna throw up a number, but most of young people here speak English, so you can perfectly communicate. Yeah. And then, most people, I don't know if most people, but a lot of people learn languages just for practical reasons. And that's not my case. I don't like that, but anyway, that's another topic, right? So my point is, I have many friends who don't speak Polish just after a few years in Poland. And to be clear on this, I'm not judging them. They're obviously free to do whatever they want. I'm just talking about it to use it as an example of someone who's been exposed to the language for a long time and still can't speak the language because it's just noise in their ears. Okay. So that's why whenever I hear someone say, you want to learn English, just go to the United States for some time, or go to United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, or Nigeria, or whatever, right? And same with any other language. So in my eyes, I think that's probably the best strategy when you're already on a sort of intermediate level. I don't like to talk about specific levels, but the idea is whenever you can already communicate, all right, even if in a simple way, or the most important thing is when you're at a point in which you can understand a normal conversation, right? I mean, of course, there are differences. If there's some background noise, if you're hanging out with friends in a loud bar, that's always gonna be more complicated, of course. But in a normal informal conversation with friends, with no background noise or no no hurdles like that, if you can understand, what's going on, if you can watch a documentary and understand what's going on, you can go to a country in which your target language is spoken, and it's going to be a great experience, and you're going to speed up the process a lot because you're going to get exposed to the language for several hours every day, and if you compare that to the 2-3 hours of classes per week that we usually get as language students, that's going to make a huge difference, because there's a huge difference in the amount of time that you're exposed to the language. Okay, so that's why I wanted to talk about this in this episode, because if you're thinking about learning a specific language and you're thinking, okay, I'll just go and live in that country, and it's everything's the process is gonna take care of itself, right? And I'm not saying don't do it, but be careful about it, all right? Because it can be a frustrating experience as well. But obviously, when you already can understand the conversation, when you can talk with people in the street, even if you have a lot of room for improvement, that's obviously going to be a great experience. I mean, of course, you also have to surround yourself with native speakers and hang out with native speakers of the language, right? Because we all know people who live in a certain country, but they're not really hanging out with native speakers most of the time, right? So even though they may be able to communicate in the target language, and they have access to it because they live in the country, maybe they're only listening to the target language for half an hour a day because they're hanging out with friends from their own country or whatever the reason, right? So anyway, just to wrap things up here, or to sum things up, if you're thinking about learning language by going to live in a foreign country in which your target language is spoken, do it if you want, of course. Like I said, I don't want you to think that I'm saying no, don't do it. No, do it, but be aware of the fact that if you're starting from scratch or if you're a beginner, it might be a frustrating experience at the beginning. All right. I'm not saying it's always gonna be like that, but that might be the case, especially if the language is much different to your native language or the ones you already speak. Because again, to give you an example, I speak Italian now, but if 5 years ago, when I didn't know anything about Italian, I had thought about learning Italian and about the possibility of going to Italy to learn the language, it probably wouldn't have been a frustrating experience for me because of the similarities between Italian and Spanish. And even though I couldn't say a single word, just a few words, of course, I could have probably understood quite a bit of a conversation, and little by little, I was, little by little, but really quickly, I think I would have been able to understand most of what was going on when speaking with friends or when meeting new people, like native speakers. So that might be an exception, but in my case, when I first came to Poland, and Polish is a completely different language to Spanish, so like I said, I didn't understand anything. So if that was a different scenario because I was coming on studies and I had friends from different countries and so on. But sometimes if you're an adult and you're coming to a new country and you don't know anyone, and you just go into that country hoping to sort of pick up the language at a faster pace, like I said, just be careful. All right, that's all I want to say. That go ahead and do it if you want to do it, but don't think that's the main point. That's the main message I want to convey today. That don't think that by going to a specific country, you're automatically going to learn the language. Like a miracle process. All right. So that to me is the most important thing. All right. And but obviously, once again, and for the last time, if you're intermediate or advanced level, and you go, you want to learn Polish, and you go to Poland, you're gonna learn Russian, and you go to Russia, etc. That's gonna speed things up, obviously, because you're gonna be exposed to the language for a few hours a day. All right. Okay, my friends. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And yeah, finally, before wrapping things up here, the last thing I want to say is that also when people call about immersion, I mean, this is related to one previous episode in which I talked about the difference between input and output. Okay, and I'm sure you've heard this before. Like people say, yeah, my friend XYZ learn, I don't know, English, French, or whatever the language, because he or she got a lot of practice, when living in England, France, or whatever it is. All right, and because of the traditional grammar approach, again, they think that person learned the language because he or she got to speak on a daily basis for a few hours. And I just want to be clear on this as well. Like, that person didn't learn the language because he or she got to speak the language every single day. Because again, when we speak, we don't learn the language. All right, we learn the language by listening and reading, and when we speak, we show what we've learned, what we've already learned. To put it into simple words, okay? But so directly speaking, I mean, when you're speaking, you're not directly learning the language. The thing is, in a real life conversation, when you speak to someone, that person is going to answer you. So you're going to get input. And, if you're at a good level, you're going to get comprehensible input. All right. So speaking does help you improve, does help you learn the language indirectly. All right. When you talk to someone and the other person talks back to you. All right. So I also wanted to be clear on that. But anyway, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this new episode. And as usual, yeah, let me know in the comment section down below whether, you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, whether you agree partly and there's something you want to add. Feel free to do so. And as usual, as long as we're respectful, I'm more than open to different ideas, to different opinions. All right. And yeah, if you have any other question about language learning, go ahead as well. And with that being said, I thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you very much for coming this far in this episode. And I'll see you in the next episode number 7. Thank you, my dear friend, and I'll see you soon.